The crack of a gunshot tore through the midnight air as Sophia Valdez sprinted through the underbrush, her wedding dress catching on brambles and thorns. Behind her, the voices of her pursuers grew louder, their lanterns casting eerie shadows through the New Mexico Territory wilderness. Just hours earlier, she had been standing at an altar, facing a man 3 times her age who had purchased her hand in marriage from her stepfather. Now she was running for her life, her breathing ragged, with nothing but the tattered white gown on her back and a small locket containing her mother's portrait. The year was 1878, and Sophia had made the most dangerous decision of her 19 years. She had refused to say, "I do" to Maxwell Thornton, the wealthiest and most ruthless businessman in the territory. When he had reached for her arm at the altar with rage in his eyes, survival instinct had taken over. She had pushed him away and fled through the church's side door, disappearing into the night. Another gunshot rang out, closer this time. Her bare feet were bleeding from rocks and cactus spines, but Sophia didn't dare slow down. The rough terrain of southern New Mexico was unforgiving, especially to a young woman who had spent most of her life sheltered in her father's home until his death 2 years prior. Her stepmother's remarriage to a gambling man had sealed Sophia's fate until she chose to rewrite it. Dawn was breaking over the distant mountains when Sophia stumbled upon a small creek. She collapsed at its edge, cupping the cold water to her parched lips. The distant sound of hoofbeats made her freeze. They were still searching. Without thinking, she waded into the creek, following its course downstream, hoping the water would hide her tracks. The sun was high in the sky when Sophia finally emerged from the creek, her wedding dress now a sodden, muddy rag clinging to her trembling body. The desert heat quickly began to dry the fabric, but dehydration and exhaustion were taking their toll. The landscape swam before her eyes as she stumbled forward, no destination in mind except away. It was in this state that Heath Sullivan first saw her, a vision in torn white, wavering like a mirage on the horizon of his cattle ranch 10 miles outside of Deming, New Mexico Territory. At 26, Heath had already established himself as one of the most respected ranchers in Luna County, though he kept mostly to himself. The war had taken something from him that the peaceful isolation of ranch life was slowly returning. He squinted against the harsh sunlight, wondering if his eyes were playing tricks. But as the figure collapsed to the ground, Heath spurred his horse forward without hesitation. Miss, can you hear me?" Heath dismounted quickly, kneeling beside the unconscious woman. Her skin was hot to the touch, her lips cracked from dehydration. The remains of what had clearly been a fine wedding dress told a story he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Gently, he lifted her onto his horse, mounting behind her and cradling her limp form against his chest as he turned toward home. The Sullivan Ranch was modest compared to some in the territory, but Heath had built it with his own hands after returning from fighting in the Union Army. The main house was solid pine with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. A barn and corral stood nearby, housing his small herd of horses and the cattle that were the foundation of his livelihood. Mrs. Abernathy, the widow who came 3 times a week to cook and clean for him, gasped when Heath carried the unconscious woman through the door. "Land sakes, Mr. Sullivan, what in heaven's name have you found now?" "She needs help, Mrs. Abernathy. She was wandering in the south pasture, half dead from the heat. Can you fetch some water and clean clothes, and perhaps send your boy for the doctor?" Heath laid Sophia gently on the spare bed in his guest room, uncomfortable with how fragile she felt in his arms. He'd rescued injured animals before, even the occasional lost traveler, but never a young woman in a wedding dress. When Mrs. Abernathy returned with water, Heath retreated to the porch, his thoughts troubled. A runaway bride meant trouble, the kind that might follow her to his doorstep. Yet something in her desperate flight resonated with him. He had seen too many people trapped in situations not of their choosing during the war. Whatever her story, he couldn't have left her to die in the desert. It was nearly sunset when Sophia's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, panic seized her as she found herself in an unfamiliar room. She bolted upright, then immediately regretted it as dizziness overwhelmed her. "Easy now," came a gentle voice from beside the bed. "You're safe here." Sophia turned to see a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and practical hands. "Where am I? Who are you?" "I'm Mrs. Abernathy, dear. You're at the Sullivan Ranch. Mr. Sullivan found you collapsed on his land and brought you here. You've been unconscious most of the day." Memories flooded back her escape, the pursuit, the endless walking. Sophia's hand flew to her throat where the locket should have been. My mother's locket. "It's right here on the nightstand, dear. Mr. Sullivan made sure we kept it safe. Now, I've brought you some clothes that might fit. They belonged to Mr. Sullivan's sister when she visited last year." Sophia accepted the simple cotton dress gratefully. "Thank you. I don't know how I can repay your kindness." "You can start by telling us your name and how you came to be wandering the desert in a wedding dress," came a deep voice from the doorway. Sophia looked up to see a tall man with broad shoulders filling the frame. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but his hazel eyes held a gentleness that belied his imposing frame. A thin scar ran along his jawline, disappearing into the collar of his shirt. "This is Mr. Sullivan," Mrs. Abernathy explained, "the man who saved your life." Sophia swallowed hard. "My name is Sophia Valdez, and I was running away from my wedding." Heath's expression remained neutral. "I figured as much. The question is someone looking for you? Someone who might bring trouble to my door?" "Heath Sullivan," Mrs. Abernathy scolded. "The girl's barely conscious and you're interrogating her." But Sophia appreciated his directness. "Yes, Maxwell Thornton. He's a businessman from Silver City. My stepfather arranged our marriage to settle his debts. I refused to go through with it at the altar." Her voice trembled slightly. "Mr. Thornton isn't a man who accepts being publicly humiliated. He and his men were pursuing me when I fled." Heath's jaw tightened at the name. Maxwell Thornton's reputation extended throughout the territory, land acquisitions by any means necessary, political connections that kept the law looking the other way, and rumors of disappeared rivals. "Silver City's a good 70 miles from here," Heath said finally. "You're welcome to stay until you recover and figure out your next steps, but I won't lie to the law if they come asking." "I understand," Sophia replied, meeting his gaze steadily despite her fear. "I won't bring trouble to your home. Once I'm able, I'll move on." Something in her dignified response softened Heath's expression. "Rest now. We can talk more in the morning." After Heath and Mrs. Abernathy left, Sophia changed into the borrowed dress, grateful to be rid of the ruined wedding gown. The room was simple but comfortable, a far cry from the elaborate mansion Thornton had shown her, boasting of the luxury that would be hers as his wife. That luxury had felt like a prison even before she had seen the cold cruelty in his eyes when she hesitated at the altar. Through the window, she could see Heath walking toward the barn, his stride purposeful. Her rescuer was an enigma, gruff yet kind, cautious yet generous. Sophia touched the simple wooden cross hanging above the bed. Whatever happened next, she had been granted at least a temporary reprieve. Morning brought the smells of coffee and bacon drifting under her door. Sophia's stomach growled fiercely, reminding her she hadn't eaten since the previous morning. She made her way carefully down the hallway, following the sounds of conversation to a bright kitchen where Mrs. Abernathy was serving breakfast to Heath. "Good morning," Sophia said hesitantly from the doorway. Heath looked up, seeming surprised to see her on her feet. "Miss Valdez, you're looking better. Please call me Sophia, and thank you both for your kindness." Mrs. Abernathy bustled over, leading her to the table. "Sit down before you fall down, child. You need food to regain your strength." As Sophia ate, Heath explained his daily routine on the ranch. "Mrs. Abernathy comes 3 days a week to help with cooking in the house. The rest of the time it's just me and occasionally my ranch hand, Thomas, who lives in town. He comes out to help with the larger cattle drives or when I need to repair fencing." "Do you have family nearby?" Sophia asked. A shadow crossed Heath's face. "My parents died before the war. My sister Clara is married to a banker in Denver. It's just me here." He pushed back from the table. "I need to check on a sick calf. Mrs. Abernathy can help you with anything you need." After he left, Mrs. Abernathy sighed. "Don't mind him, dear. He's been keeping to himself since he came back from the war. Lost something of himself in those battles, I think. He seems very kind, despite his reservations about helping me. Oh, he is. Heart of gold beneath that gruff exterior. Just wary of entanglements. The older woman began clearing the dishes. Now, how are those feet of yours? Let me have a look before I leave today. The next few days fell into a quiet rhythm. Sophia's strength returned gradually as she rested and ate Mrs. Abernathy's hearty meals. On the third day, when the older woman wasn't there, Sophia ventured into the kitchen and prepared a simple dinner of beans and cornbread. It was the least she could do to thank Heath for his hospitality. When he returned from working with the cattle, the surprise on his face was evident. You didn't need to cook. I wanted to contribute something, Sophia replied. I can't pay you, but I can help around the house while I'm here. Heath awkwardly accepted a plate from her. This is good, he said after tasting the cornbread. Where did you learn to cook? My mother taught me before she died. My father was a professor who came west to study the geography. After he passed, my stepmother had little interest in domestic matters, so I ran the household. Sophia sat across from him. What about you? How did you learn to ranch? Heath's usual reserve softened slightly. Taught myself mostly. Worked on a few ranches before the war, then used my army pay to buy this land. It was nothing but scrub and dust when I started. You've built something impressive. It's enough. He looked at her curiously. What would you have done if you hadn't been forced into that marriage, if your father had lived? The question caught Sophia by surprise. Few had ever asked what she wanted. My father was teaching me to be a teacher like him. I hope to have my own schoolroom someday. Their conversation flowed more easily that evening, and Sophia glimpsed the man beneath Heath's reserved exterior, thoughtful, principled, and carrying wounds that went deeper than the visible scar on his jaw. As the days passed, Sophia took on more household duties, grateful for the purpose it gave her. Heath found himself watching her from afar, the graceful way she moved about his home, the small improvements she made that transformed the functional space into something warmer. He hadn't realized how stark his existence had been until she brought color back into it. A week after her arrival, Sophia was hanging laundry in the yard when she spotted a dust cloud on the horizon. Riders were approaching, 3 of them, moving fast. Her heart raced as she dropped the linens and ran to the barn where Heath was repairing a saddle. Riders coming, she said breathlessly. 3 of them. Heath nodded grimly, reaching for his rifle. Get in the house. Stay out of sight until I call for you. From the window of her room, Sophia watched as Heath walked out to meet the approaching men, rifle held casually but ready. As they drew closer, she released a breath she didn't know she was holding. It wasn't Thornton or his men, just a rancher and his sons from a neighboring property. When Heath came to tell her it was safe, he found her trembling despite the heat. It was just the Daltons from the next ranch over, wanted to warn me about rustlers they spotted near their northern pasture. I'm sorry, Sophia said, embarrassed by her fear. I shouldn't have assumed. No, you were right to be cautious. Heath hesitated, then sat beside her on the edge of the bed. Sophia, you can't keep living like this, jumping at every approaching rider. Thornton has connections, but his reach isn't infinite. There must be somewhere you could go to start fresh. I've been thinking about that, she admitted. I have a cousin in California. We corresponded after my father died, and she offered me a place with her family. But I have no money for passage, and Thornton might look for me at the stagecoach offices. Heath was quiet for a long moment. The cattle drive to Santa Fe leaves in 3 weeks. I could arrange passage for you with a family heading west from there. It would give you time to recover fully, and no one would think to look for you with a cattle drive. The offer was generous, but Sophia felt an unexpected pang at the thought of leaving. In just a week, the Sullivan Ranch had become a sanctuary, and Heath, despite his initial wariness, had shown her more kindness than any man since her father. Thank you, she said softly. That's very kind. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson, Heath spoke of his time in the war, something he rarely discussed with anyone. He described the horrors he'd witnessed, the friends he'd lost, and the disillusionment that had driven him to seek solitude in the New Mexico territory. "Sometimes I think I left the best parts of myself on those battlefields," he confessed, staring into the distance. "Came back hollow." Sophia's hand tentatively covered his. "I don't believe that. A hollow man wouldn't have stopped to help a stranger in a ruined wedding dress." Heath looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face, illuminated by the fading light. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of shared loneliness, of unexpected connection. The following days brought them closer as they worked side by side on the ranch. Heath showed Sophia how to feed the chickens and milk the cow, while she taught him to make her mother's recipes. In the evenings, they sat together on the porch, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying the peaceful sounds of the desert night. Mrs. Abernathy watched their growing attachment with knowing eyes, but kept her observations to herself. It was the most life she'd seen in Heath Sullivan since she'd known him. 2 weeks after Sophia's arrival, disaster struck. Heath was breaking a new horse in the corral when the animal reared unexpectedly, throwing him against the fence posts. Sophia, who had been watching from outside the corral, screamed as Heath crumpled to the ground, motionless. She scrambled through the fence rails, heedless of the nervous horse still prancing nearby. Heath was conscious, but clearly in pain, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. "Don't move," she instructed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Where does it hurt?" "Ribs," he gasped, "and my left arm." With strength born of necessity, Sophia helped Heath to his feet and supported him as they slowly made their way to the house. Once inside, she eased him onto his bed and set about cleaning the head wound. "You need a doctor," she said firmly when he protested. "Thomas will be here tomorrow. He can fetch one then," Heath argued. "You could have broken ribs. What if one punctures your lung?" The genuine concern in her eyes silenced his objections. Heath watched as she carefully unbuttoned his shirt to examine the already darkening bruises along his side. Her touch was gentle yet confident. "Nothing appears to be out of place, but these bruises are bad," she murmured. "I'll make a poultice for the swelling." As she worked, Heath studied her face, the intensity of her concentration, the compassionate set of her mouth. He had grown accustomed to her presence in his home, but this was different. The professional detachment she was trying to maintain couldn't quite mask the worry in her eyes. "Where did you learn to tend wounds?" he asked, wincing as she applied the poultice. "My mother nursed during the war before we came west. She taught me what she knew." Sophia carefully wrapped bandages around his ribs. "You'll need to rest for a few days." "No arguments." Heath raised an eyebrow at her commanding tone, but nodded. "Yes, madam." Their roles reversed over the next several days. Sophia took on the management of the ranch, directing Thomas when he arrived, feeding the animals, and caring for Heath. To her surprise, she enjoyed the responsibility and the physical work, finding satisfaction in learning new skills. Heath, confined to bed or limited movement around the house, watched her transformation with admiration. The frightened bride he'd found in the desert had become a capable, confident woman who faced each new challenge with determination. One evening, as Sophia read to him from one of his books, Heath interrupted her. "You're not what I expected, Sophia Valdez." She looked up, puzzled. "What do you mean? When I found you in that wedding dress, I thought you were just another society girl who'd gotten cold feet. But you're stronger than that, more resilient." He gestured to the window where they could see the ranch bathed in moonlight. "You've taken to ranch life like you were born to it." Sophia closed the book, considering his words. "My father raised me to believe I could learn anything if I applied myself. After he died, my stepfather treated me like property to be traded. Being here, contributing, making my own decisions, it's reminded me who I really am." "And who is that?" "Someone who wants to choose her own path." She met his gaze directly. "Someone who's not afraid of hard work or challenges if they lead to freedom." The intensity in her eyes stirred something in Heath that he'd thought long buried: hope, desire, possibility. But the shadow of her planned departure in just a week hung between them. Heath's recovery progressed quickly. though Sophia insisted he continue to rest more than he would have chosen. Thomas came daily to handle the heavier ranch work, reporting back to Sophia rather than Heath, much to the rancher's chagrin and secret amusement. "Never thought I'd see the day when Thomas took orders from anyone but me," Heath commented as he watched from the porch, while Sophia directed the ranch hand in repairing a section of fence. "He respects you too much to let your ranch fall apart while you heal," Sophia replied, sitting beside him, "and I think he's a bit afraid of me after I told him exactly how to properly muck out the stalls." Heath laughed, then winced as his ribs protested. "You're a natural at giving orders, Miss Valdez. My mother would say I'm forthright. My stepmother called it unbecomingly bold." "I call it refreshing," Heath said softly. Their eyes met and the air between them seemed to still. Heath reached out slowly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek, and Sophia leaned almost imperceptibly into his touch. The moment was broken by Thomas calling from the corral, asking about a loose shoe on one of the horses. Sophia pulled away, her cheeks flushed as she went to assist. That night, neither could sleep. Heath stood at his window, watching the moonlight silvering the landscape, trying to reconcile the growing feelings in his heart with the reality of Sophia's situation. She was running from a powerful, dangerous man. She had plans to reach California. His life was here, in the solitude he'd chosen. Sophia, too, was awake, conflicted by emotions she hadn't anticipated. In the short weeks at the Sullivan Ranch, she had found not just safety but purpose and connection. Heath's quiet strength, his principled nature, his unexpected gentleness, all had worked their way into her heart. But she had no right to disrupt the life he had carefully built, to bring the danger that followed her to his doorstep. The next morning brought unwelcome news. Thomas arrived earlier than usual, his expression grave. "Riders in town asking questions about a runaway bride," he reported as Heath and Sophia sat at the breakfast table. "3 men working for some businessman from Silver City. They're offering a reward for information." Heath's face hardened. "Did they mention names?" "Looking for a Miss Valdez," they said. Described her pretty clear. Said she's the legal wife of their employer, though the ceremony wasn't completed. Sophia's hand trembled as she set down her coffee cup. "They've tracked me this far." "Deming's a small town," Thomas continued. "Talk spreads fast. I didn't say nothing, but someone might remember I work for you, Mr. Sullivan, and that you brought home a young woman a few weeks back." Heath nodded grimly. "Thank you for the warning, Thomas. Best you get back to town before they notice your absence." After Thomas left, Sophia stood abruptly. "I should go, now, if they come here." "And where would you go?" Heath demanded, rising to face her. "On foot? With no supplies? They'd find you by nightfall." "I can't let them come here. You've done too much for me already." "If Thornton found out you helped me." "Thornton doesn't frighten me," Heath cut her off. "And I'm not sending you back to a man who would force you to marry him." "But your ranch, your life, can be defended?" Heath moved closer, taking her trembling hands in his. "Sophia, listen to me. The cattle drive leaves in 3 days. We can still get you to Santa Fe as planned. Until then, we'll be vigilant. I won't let them take you." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made her breath catch. "Why would you risk everything for me?" Heath's answer was to pull her gently into his arms. The embrace was tentative at first, mindful of his healing ribs, but as Sophia's arms wrapped around his waist, it deepened into something more profound. When they finally drew apart, Heath's eyes held a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "Because in these few weeks you've brought more life to this ranch and to me than I've known in years," he said quietly, "and I'm not ready to let that go." The honest admission hung between them, changing everything. Sophia raised her hand to his face, tracing the scar along his jaw. "I'm not ready either," she whispered. Their first kiss was gentle, a question and an answer in one. The second was deeper, an affirmation of feelings neither had expected to find. But reality intruded all too quickly. They needed to prepare for the possibility of Thornton's men finding the ranch. Heath sent Thomas with a message to a former Army comrade who now served as a deputy in the next county, explaining the situation and requesting assistance. Meanwhile, he and Sophia secured the ranch as best they could. That night, as they sat by the fire, Heath shared a decision he'd been contemplating. "I've been thinking about going with you to Santa Fe." Sophia looked up in surprise. "What about the ranch?" "Thomas can manage for a few weeks. I'd feel better seeing you safely to your cousin in California." He hesitated. "And perhaps I could see if there's ranching opportunities there." The implication was clear. Heath was considering a future that included her. Sophia's heart raced at the possibility. "You would leave everything you've built here?" "A man can build again, especially with the right partner." He took her hand. "I know it's fast, Sophia. We've only known each other a few weeks, but sometimes life doesn't give us the luxury of time." Before she could respond, the sound of approaching horses broke the night silence. Heath was on his feet instantly, extinguishing the lamps and reaching for his rifle. "Upstairs," he ordered quietly. "There's a trap door to the attic in the hallway ceiling. Use it if necessary." Sophia clutched his arm. "Don't face them alone. Go. I'll be fine." He pressed a quick kiss to her forehead before moving to the window. From the shadows, Heath counted 4 riders approaching the house, too many for Thornton's men to be a coincidence. He positioned himself by the front door, rifle ready. The riders stopped in the yard. "Sullivan," a voice called out, "we know you're in there. We just want to talk." Heath remained silent, watching through the window as the men spread out, surrounding the house. "We know you're harboring Maxwell Thornton's wife," the voice continued. "There's a handsome reward for her return." "No need for unpleasantness." "She's not Thornton's wife," Heath finally called back, "and she's not here." "Search the barn," the leader ordered one of his men. To Heath, he shouted, "Be reasonable, Sullivan. Thornton's not a man you want as an enemy. The girl made a commitment. She needs to honor it." "A commitment made under duress isn't binding," Heath replied. "Now get off my property." The response was a gunshot that splintered the wood beside the window. Heath ducked, then returned fire, aiming at the ground near the leader's horse. The animal reared, nearly unseating its rider. "That's your only warning," Heath shouted. "The next shot won't miss." Upstairs, Sophia heard the exchange with growing horror. This was exactly what she had feared Heath in danger because of her. She moved to the window, trying to see the confrontation below. In the moonlight, she could make out the 4 riders, one now searching the barn while the others maintained their positions around the house. A flicker of movement near the corral caught her attention. Thomas was creeping along the fence line, rifle in hand. He had returned, likely after delivering Heath's message. Silently, she prayed he wouldn't be spotted. Downstairs, the standoff continued. "You're outnumbered, Sullivan," the leader called. "We're coming in to search the house. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Heath's response was another warning shot. "My property, my rules. Leave now." The leader signaled to his men, who began to dismount. Heath knew they would rush the house from different directions. He couldn't cover all approaches simultaneously. Just then, a shot rang out from the direction of the corral. One of Thornton's men cried out, clutching his arm. "What the hell?" The leader whirled toward the sound. Thomas's voice carried clearly through the night. "Next one's between your eyes if you don't clear out." The momentary confusion gave Heath the advantage he needed. He threw open the door and stepped onto the porch, rifle aimed steadily. "You heard the man. Clear out, now." The injured man was already remounting, cursing in pain. The leader hesitated, clearly calculating the odds. "This isn't over, Sullivan. Thornton will hear about this." "Tell Thornton that Miss Valdez is under my protection," Heath replied coldly. "And if he or any of his men set foot on my property again, they won't leave alive." The leader spat on the ground. "You're a fool to cross Thornton for a woman. He'll ruin you." "Some things are worth the risk." Heath kept his rifle trained on them as they slowly backed their horses away. Once they were out of sight, Thomas emerged from his position by the corral. "Figured you might need some help, Mr. Sullivan." "Good timing, Thomas. Did you deliver my message?" "Yes, sir. Deputy Jenkins said he'd be here by morning with papers." Thomas glanced at the retreating dust cloud. They'll be back with more men. I know. Get inside. We need to prepare. Sophia met them at the door, her face pale but resolute. I heard everything. They know I'm here. Heath nodded grimly. We need to change our plans. The cattle drive is too obvious now. They'll be watching all the routes out of the territory. What options do we have? Sophia asked. Heath and Thomas exchanged glances. There's the old mining trails through the mountains, Thomas suggested. Rough going, but they come out near Las Cruces. From there, you could catch a train west. It's risky, Heath said, but it might be our best chance. They spent the night making preparations, gathering supplies, selecting the surest-footed horses, planning their route. By dawn, they were ready to depart. Thomas would stay behind to maintain the appearance that Heath was still at the ranch, hopefully buying them time. As the first light of day touched the eastern horizon, Deputy Jenkins arrived as promised, bringing legal papers that might offer Sophia some protection. The affidavit stated that she had not completed the marriage ceremony and had fled of her own free will, fearing for her safety. It wasn't much, but it was something to counter Thornton's claims. This should help if you're questioned by law enforcement, Jenkins explained, but I can't guarantee every lawman will honor it, especially those in Thornton's pocket. We understand the risks, Heath said, shaking the deputy's hand. Thank you for coming. Just be careful, Jenkins warned. Thornton's influence reaches far, and he's not a man who forgives being crossed. As they finished loading the horses, Sophia took one last look at the ranch house that had become her sanctuary. I'm sorry to take you away from your home. Heath followed her gaze, then turned to meet her eyes. Home isn't just a place, Sophia. It's where you find peace. He reached for her hand. I found more peace in these few weeks with you than in all the years since the war. The simple declaration held more meaning than 1,000 poetic words. Sophia squeezed his hand, her heart too full for speech. They set out as the sun crested the mountains, taking the least traveled paths away from town. The old mining trails were treacherous, narrow, steep, and often obscured by growth. But Heath navigated them confidently, his years of exploring the territory serving them well. By midday, they had climbed high enough to look back over the valley. Deming was a distant cluster of buildings, the Sullivan Ranch not even visible from this height. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also possibility. How long to Las Cruces? Sophia asked as they paused to rest the horses. 3 days if we push hard, Heath replied. From there, we can take the train to Tucson, then on to California. The stark reality of their journey settled over Sophia. You're leaving everything behind, your ranch, your livelihood, because of me. Heath turned to her, his expression serious. Not because of you, for us. He took her hands in his. Sophia, I know this is happening fast, but these past weeks have shown me what could be possible. A life that's not just existing in isolation, but truly living. If you feel the same way. I do, she said softly. I never expected to find you when I ran from that altar. But now I can't imagine a future that doesn't include you. Heath's smile transformed his face, erasing years of solitude and grief. He leaned forward, kissing her with a tenderness that spoke of promises and tomorrows. Their moment of connection was interrupted by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Heath pulled away, instantly alert. We need to move, now. They quickly mounted and continued along the trail, pushing deeper into the rugged terrain. The pursuit was relentless over the next 2 days. Several times they spotted riders in the distance, forcing them to alter their route and take even more difficult paths. On the 3rd day, as they descended toward Las Cruces, disaster struck. Sophia's horse stepped into a hidden hole, breaking its leg and throwing her to the ground. Though she escaped with minor bruises, they were now down to 1 horse. We'll have to double up, Heath said, helping her onto his mount. It'll slow us down, but we can still make it. They had just crested a ridge when shots rang out behind them. Thornton's men had caught up. Heath spurred the horse forward, one arm protectively around Sophia as they galloped down the slope. There's an old mission just ahead, he shouted over the wind. We can make a stand there. The abandoned mission appeared through the tree's adobe walls, crumbling but still standing, offering some shelter from the gunfire. They reached it just as another volley of shots kicked up dust at their horses' heels. Heath helped Sophia dismount and ushered her inside, then slapped the horse's flank, sending it running to draw away some of their pursuers. Inside the mission, he positioned Sophia behind the most solid wall and checked his ammunition. 5 shots, he said grimly. Make them count. Sophia nodded, taking the small derringer he offered her. I won't let them take me back. The determination in her voice made Heath pause. He took her face in his hands, his eyes intense. Listen to me. No matter what happens, you keep moving toward Las Cruces. The station master there is an old friend of my father's. Tell him who you are and that I sent you. He'll help you get on a train west. I'm not leaving you, Sophia protested. If it comes to that, you must. Heath's voice brooked no argument. Promise me, Sophia. Before she could respond, the first of their pursuers appeared at the mission entrance. Heath's shot caught him in the shoulder, sending him stumbling backward. Sullivan, a familiar voice called. It was the leader from the ranch. You're only making this worse for yourselves. Thornton wants his bride back, and he wants you to answer for interfering. She's not his bride, Heath called back, and she's not property to be claimed. A barrage of gunfire was the response, chipping away at the adobe walls. Heath returned fire sparingly, each shot carefully placed to drive the attackers back without wasting precious ammunition. As the standoff continued, Sophia noticed a narrow window at the back of the mission that opened onto a steep ravine. If they could reach it, they might have a chance to escape while their attackers focused on the main entrance. She tugged Heath's sleeve and pointed. He nodded in understanding, motioning for her to stay low as they inched toward the window. Just as they reached it, the mission door splintered open. Heath whirled, firing his last 2 shots. One found its mark, but 3 men still pushed through the entrance. Go, Heath urged, physically lifting Sophia toward the window. I'll hold them off. Not without you, she insisted, grabbing his shirt. The momentary delay proved fortunate. As the attackers raised their weapons, new gunfire erupted from outside, not aimed at Heath and Sophia, but at Thornton's men. This is the territorial marshal, a commanding voice bellowed. Drop your weapons! The sudden turn of events left everyone frozen in confusion. Heath recovered first, disarming the nearest attacker with a swift blow. Outside, more voices joined the marshals, ordering the remaining pursuers to surrender. When the dust settled, Sophia and Heath emerged from the mission to find Deputy Jenkins with the territorial marshal and 4 deputies. Thomas stood nearby, looking exhausted, but triumphant. Thought you might need reinforcements, Thomas said with a grin. Rode straight to the marshal's office after you left. The marshal, a stern-faced man with a silver mustache, approached them. Deputy Jenkins explained the situation. These men are wanted for questioning in 3 counties. Seems Mr. Thornton's business practices have finally caught up with him. What do you mean? Sophia asked. There's been an investigation into his land acquisitions. Several homesteaders came forward claiming they were forced to sell under duress or outright threats. The marshal nodded to Sophia. Your stepfather was one of the first to testify when Thornton tried to call in his gambling debts. The news was stunning. Sophia had assumed her stepfather had simply sold her to settle his debts. To learn he had found some courage to stand against Thornton changed her understanding of events. So Thornton's been arrested? Heath asked. Not yet, but it's just a matter of time. These men will face charges of attempted kidnapping and assault. The marshal tipped his hat to Sophia. You're free to go where you please, Miss Valdez. Thornton has no claim on you. The relief that washed over them was profound. After giving their statements to the marshal, Heath and Sophia were escorted to Las Cruces, where they were offered rooms at the hotel to recover from their ordeal. That evening, sitting on the hotel balcony overlooking the town, they finally had a moment to process all that had happened. I can hardly believe it's over, Sophia said, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson, the same colors she had admired from Heath's porch just days earlier. Not over, Heath corrected gently. Just beginning. He took her hand, his expression earnest. Sophia, when I found you in that wedding dress, I had no idea you would change everything. My life was empty before you. I don't want to go back to that. You don't have to, she whispered. Neither of us does. I want to build a life with you, Heath continued. Not at my ranch, that place holds too many solitary years. Somewhere new, where we can both start fresh. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple silver band. This was my mother's. I've carried it since she died, waiting for the right person to give it to. Sophia's breath caught as he held it out to her. It's too soon, she protested weakly, even as her heart raced with joy. We've only known each other a few weeks. Some things you just know, Heath said simply. I love you, Sophia Valdez. Will you marry me not because anyone is forcing you, but because you choose to? Tears filled Sophia's eyes as she extended her hand. Yes, she whispered, because I choose you. Because I love you. The ring slipped onto her finger, a perfect fit. Their kiss sealed a promise born in the most unexpected circumstances. 2 days later, they boarded a train bound for California, their few possessions packed in borrowed trunks. Thomas had agreed to sell the Sullivan ranch and forward the proceeds once they were settled. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape together. 6 months later, in the spring of 1879, Heath and Sophia Sullivan stood on the porch of their new home, a modest ranch in the fertile valleys of Northern California. The property needed work, but the soil was rich and the location perfect for the horse breeding operation Heath envisioned. More importantly, a small schoolhouse stood in the nearby town where Sophia had secured a position teaching the local children. What do you think? Heath asked, his arm around her waist as they surveyed their land. Will it suit? Sophia leaned into him, her hand resting on the slight swell of her stomach where their first child was growing. It's perfect. A place for new beginnings. Heath placed his hand over hers, wonder filling his expression as he felt the future stirring beneath his palm. When I offered you shelter that day, I never imagined you'd give me so much more in return. We gave each other what we needed, Sophia replied, turning to face him. You offered your home and heart when I had nothing. I offered mine when you thought yours was empty. Their kiss was filled with promise as the California sun set behind them, painting the sky in colors that reminded them of New Mexico evenings on a porch where they had first begun to dream of possibilities. In the years that followed, the Sullivan Ranch prospered, becoming known throughout the region for its fine horses. Their family grew with the birth of a son they named James, after Sophia's father, followed 2 years later by twins, a boy and girl they called Thomas and Clara, after those who had helped them find their way to each other. Sophia's school expanded as the community grew, eventually becoming the academy she had always dreamed of establishing. Heath found that raising children brought healing to wounds the war had left, as he taught his sons and daughter the values of compassion and courage that had drawn him to their mother. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they stood watching their children play in the fields that had flourished under their care, Heath turned to Sophia with the same wonder that had filled him when he first saw her on his land. Do you ever think about that day? He asked. How different our lives might have been if you hadn't run from that altar, or if I hadn't ridden out to check the south pasture at that exact time. Sophia smiled, the years having only deepened her love for this man who had offered shelter when she had nothing but the clothes on her back. I believe some souls are meant to find each other, no matter what paths they take. Even across a desert in a torn wedding dress? Heath teased, the humor in his eyes matched by the tenderness in his touch as he drew her close. Especially then, Sophia replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss the man who had become her home, her heart, her destiny. As twilight descended on their California ranch, so different from the New Mexico territory where their story began, Heath and Sophia Sullivan looked toward the horizon with gratitude for the journey that had brought them together, a journey that had started with an escape and a rescue, and had become a life built on choice, courage, and abiding love.